Hey, welcome to Ed, a podcast about the teaching life. This is Conversation 72, and I'm your host, Shane Lawrence. Ed is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network powered by ATB, and I am joined this week for part 2 of our conversation by founder of the Blue Sky School, Shauna Pollock. Okay, awesome. Well, let's make this an official start then. Shauna, thank you so much for being again on the show.
Oh, I'm so happy to be back.
Awesome. I am glad that you're happy. For those people who didn't tune in last week to the previous episode where we talked already for an hour, just a quick sort of nutshell. Who are you? What do you do?
My name is Shauna Pollock, and I am an educator, and I taught in public school classrooms for about 12 years. Mm-hmm. And then I had an opportunity to leave the classroom for a bit to write a book, and I wrote that, and it's called Creating Classroom Magic. Mm-hmm. And it came out a couple of years ago. And then I had the really unique opportunity to follow my lifelong dream and open a school. And so I'm into the second year of operation of Blue Sky School, which I co-founded with the incredible Karen Hill. And there's my little life in the shell of a nut.
I love that. I'm going to start saying that now. Instead of saying in a nutshell, I'll be like, in the shell of a nut. Tell me about you. That's beautiful. Anyway, so listeners, if you want a little more background on the Blue Sky thing, go back, listen to Conversation 71, because we're just going to dive right in now. Blue Sky School, an experimental school, experimental prototype school of tomorrow, obviously harkens to Disney, and I know that that's a huge influence on you. So I want to start there. What's the Disney influence? How did that come about? And what's its impact on the school now?
Okay, yeah. So as a kid, you often have to write those biography projects. Mm-hmm. And mine were always one of two folks who I really admired, which was either Walt Disney or Albert Einstein. And so through my childhood, I studied Walt Disney many, many times. And then as I got older, I just I didn't so much enjoy the politics of the Disney brand and the gendering of the films. And so I became alienated from the brand for a long time. And then I rediscovered my interest in Walt Disney and his sort of work as a visionary. Just a few years ago, over the winter holidays, the movie Saving Mr. Banks came out, where Tom Hanks plays Walt Disney.
Yeah, that was a good show.
Yeah, and I really, really loved it. I went with my mom, and there was a gentleman sitting behind us, and he sort of wept through the entire movie. And it was like this really, I don't even know if I've been to a movie theater since, but it was this really interesting cinematic experience for me. And then I just started researching again. I'm an avid researcher and reader, and I just sort of started reading everything I could get my hands on about Walt Disney, sort of biography-wise, coming through the lens of an adult, because the last time I'd really read about Walt Disney, I was a child. And I got really, really excited and interested in the concept for Epcot. So the original Epcot is now one of the theme parks in the Walt Disney World, Florida theming area. But originally the plan was in the late 60s, when they were buying up all the land in Florida, is Walt had already had a lot of success with Disneyland in California, and he wanted a new challenge. So there's a whole bunch of stories through his life of how he really revolutionized and created new industries. And so his final vision in his life was to create the experimental prototype city of tomorrow, or community of tomorrow, so Epcot. And it was actually going to be a city, and there were some really, really interesting ideas around it. So at the time, some of the problems that were being identified in society and in big cities were automobile traffic. It was becoming more common for families to have cars, and the traffic was becoming an issue. And additionally, American industries were noticing that a lot of innovations were not happening in America, but happening elsewhere in the world. And so these were two problems that Walt identified, and then tried to sort of be a solutionary around and figure out ways to solve these problems. And so he created these incredible plans for this planned community where there was no automobile traffic in the whole community. And he had one of his Imagineers, Bob Gurr, design all these incredible vehicles that were all electric. So the People Mover was one of them, and the monorail. So some of these they had been using at Disneyland with great success, and he decided these could work in the scale of a whole city. And then the whole city was designed in concentric circles with the central business district in the middle, and then sort of moving out into finally into residential areas in the largest circles. And so this entire planned community that was just really, really fascinating. And additionally, they would have basically an industrial park sort of associated with this city and sort of in the outskirts, where there would be different American industries would start research and development labs. So that was sort of part of the prototype piece. So the city itself would be a prototype for the future, but additionally, American industries would be able to prototype their new products and have them tested with real audiences living in this community. And so this whole idea just really, really excited me. And then I started devouring everything I could find around Epcot and whether it would have worked had Walt lived. So 3 months prior to Walt Disney's death, he actually announced the building of Epcot in one of his Disney films. And then he suddenly died of cancer very shortly after that. So the dream for Epcot at that point died with him, and the folks who were left running the company, including his brother, just didn't have the same vision and passion for that idea. So they opened another theme park, and then years later, they did open a theme park that was themed to. Sorry, I'm losing track of my brain. That was towards the vision that Walt had for this experimental prototype city. Mm-hmm. So originally, like when I first visited that park in the mid to late 80s, it's still my favorite park because it was this awesome vision for the future. But it never was the city. And so learning as an adult about this idea for the city was just too exciting for me. And I usually read and watch and listen to things through a teacher lens. And so as I was reading about this, it just made such perfect sense in my head. All the puzzle pieces fell together. Like, this is what school could and should be. It should be an experimental prototype classroom. We should be playing with the most recent research, and we should really be trying to do things differently and experimenting with our students. And so that was around, New Year's one year. And then by the time the school year had started the following September, I sort of pitched to my class of grade 3 to 4 learners that we were going to try being the experimental prototype classroom of tomorrow. And so we just kind of took every piece of the system that was in place and we looked at those and said, okay, we can't abandon those. We have to work within those parameters. So things like the curriculum and the way that the school day was designed and the terms were designed. But then beyond that, we could play with everything. And so we just had this awesome, fun year of really experimenting. And then that was what I wrote my book about, was creating an experimental prototype classroom of tomorrow. And then my lifelong dream was to then turn that into a full school. And so when the stars all aligned and the puzzle pieces fell into place for Blue Sky School, we decided that we would be the experimental prototype school of tomorrow. And so that's our aspirational and operational goal as a school, is to not only build an amazing learning experience for the learners of all ages that are in our building, but also to become this space where other folks can come and visit, look at what we can, take ideas back into their own contexts. We can have researchers come in and suggest ideas and try things out. And really just with always that future focus. Right. And unlike, a city or a theme park that you have to build things and they have to be in place for a long time, working with people, we can be extremely responsive and we can always be on the cutting edge and moving towards the future. So we won't really have that same problem of things going out of date as soon as we build them or try them, because every single week and month we are iterating on our ideas and experimenting with them. So in terms of the inspiration coming from Disney, it's certainly from Walt Disney as a person and his visions. But we're not like a school that studies Cinderella and
yeah.
which is a common misunderstanding that folks have when they hear like, oh, Shauna is a teacher who's really into Disney. I always go kind of like the person, not so much the company. So, yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Do you ever, okay, so I mean, experimentation is a process of refining, and ultimately it's a whole lot of failure before you often get to a result that's desired. Wow, two ways we could go with this. Do you ever worry? I mean, you're experimenting. Oh, this is going to sound terrible. I'm going to sound like such a naysayer, but here, you're experimenting with children, ultimately, right? So do you ever worry that it's like, well, we did that for 4 years and it didn't work, and now your education sucks and your life is ruined? I mean, do you ever, have that fear at all, or?
So I had that fear far more in my previous teaching experience, and I continue.
Oh, okay.
All we're doing with education is experimenting with children. And I like that you said with, because every now and then somebody says on, and I say, nope, it's with. But our current education system is an experiment that is failing. It's actively failing by nearly any metric, even the ones we've created to measure the system that we have. Learners are leaving unmotivated, underserved, unhappy, unprepared. So even those learners that are successful in the system as it exists, which is, that was my experience as a learner, are ill prepared for the future and for what's really happening. And with our world changing just at this unprecedented rate with the amount of global communication and connection we have, the current traditional system of schooling is going to continue to fail us. And we're seeing this all over the place. Industries around the world are no longer hiring even college and university graduates because such bad habits are trained into them. We're seeing learners need to understand how to innovate and be agile and be adaptive. And we see this in the work world. We see recently Time Magazine came out talking about valedictorians from the past 20 years and how their lives have not been as successful as who didn't have such high grades. So what we try to remind people is that actually education is an experiment. We in whatever way we do it, we're experimenting. And so the resources that we are using are the most current research on learning and development. Rather than just looking at the research around education and formalized schooling, we're trying to look at what sort of learning helps you throughout the course of your life. And that's what we are building our experiment on top of. So absolutely, we feel the weight and the pressure of building this new thing and having these families and these learners along with us that will be, the first people who have learned in this particular model. But we are keeping ourselves small. We have just the most incredible staff team and families on board with building this with us, and constant feedback, iterations, failing fast, making quick corrections, and partnering with incredible innovative leaders from across a number of different industries to really ensure that we're doing this experiment in the most responsible way possible.
Right. And so, I'm just going to come right out here. And I just have questions centered around, how does this actually work, and what are the sort of the pitfalls? So I'm not trying to come across as being like I'm not trying to poke holes here, but I just want to know if that makes sense.
Many people want to poke holes. We love. I actually say to people now, like, please ask me a question I haven't thought of, because we need to think of all of the things. So please, ask whatever you like.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, here's the thing. I mean, maybe you've already kind of voided this question, but because you talk about how the education system is currently failing. I mean, would you say the curriculum that is being laid out, by government bodies, is that an issue, or is it more just the method of delivery that's the problem?
Yes, all of the above.
Oh.
And okay, so here's the heartbreaking thing about education. I have not met a single person who has gotten into any form of education for selfish reasons. There's this misconception about teachers that they get into it for the summer holidays or whatever. But everyone I have met who works in education has incredible intentions. They want to help children build a better future and have a good schooling experience and learn lots of things. Without exception, that has been my experience. Now, there are so many things that are broken about our traditional system of education that keep those amazing people who get involved in education from doing what it is that they want to do and what they need to do. And one of the pieces of that is a content heavy curriculum that is just knowledge being split into subjects and being imparted by one adult and received by a room full of 30 children. It doesn't make sense. It's not the way natural learning happens. It's not the way lasting learning happens in any other setting except for formalized schooling.
Right.
And so and then we get stuck. Teachers and administrators and parents and children just get stuck in this system, and we don't even challenge the assumptions that we have about learning, like that children should be divided by age, or the day should be divided into subjects, or learning should be divided into subjects, or we should be measuring learners against each other and against proficiency-based standards. So all of those things contribute to the issues that are happening with education. And I'm sure, you could talk to any educator and they would agree with parts of that if they've, had the opportunity to step back and think about it. Many of them are just still working under the same assumptions, right? They got through this type of schooling system, and so they're fine. And so we continue to replicate that. And I try to be very, very careful not to, like, this is a system. This is not something that any individual is pushing. This is a system that has existed for 150 years, pretty much the same way as we're doing schooling today. And everyone to some degree sees the difficulties with it. And we try to solve it with a number of Band-Aid solutions, but we believe very strongly that actually we need to start again at the foundation. And we, I don't know if I mentioned this quote, but it's one that really guides us. It's Buckminster Fuller. And he said, in order to disrupt a system, you have to work outside of it and create a new model that makes the old model obsolete. And so for years, I endeavored to work within the system and to make changes, and had a really amazing time and worked with incredible educators and families and learners to innovate within a single classroom. But what I started to see was that impact that I could have working with a small group of learners was fantastic. But I was always wondering, what if we could do this on a wider scale, on a larger level? So take me back to what your exact question was. I sort of started with one thing there. Quelle surprise.
No, that's fine. I'm happy to wander right alongside you. That's great. Have you heard back from any of your students who have, because you're in second year now, so I assume that your oldest learners have left the school, left Blue Sky. So
no, most of our learners are still with us.
Oh.
So, yeah. So, we had just a small turnover of learners at the end of year one, and then an influx of new learners. So most of them are still with us. So we're getting to see the changes. Sorry. Finish your question though. You were saying.
Well, I'm just saying, have you heard from anyone who has left the school? Have you heard back about their experiences? I mean, I'm assuming that they're going to go on to grade 11.
Yeah. So we will. We're gonna grow with our learners. So currently we have grade 5 to grade 10 age learners. We started last year with grade 6 to grade 8 age learners. And so a couple of learners left because of families, one family relocated and two families were interested in the more traditional high school credit system. But we do have 3 current high school learners, and we'll have a larger group of high school learners next year. But any of our learners who have started with us could finish out their entire K-12 schooling with us.
Okay. So, I'm just trying to kind of get the nuts and bolts of this thing. Like, how do you see this working for students when they graduate from Blue Sky and then apply to university? Because typically, right, we expect universities to look at diploma results and this sort of thing. Like, how does that factor in? All right, we're going to get back to Blue Sky School in a second, but first I want to tell you about the Otherwise podcast. It's a show dedicated to empowering diverse communities living on Treaty 6 territory by sharing stories of our lived experiences. The show strives to highlight our collective ethno-cultural linguistic diversity and heritage, reflect who we are as a city, and bring about positive social change. If you want to know more about the show, you can head over to otherwiseshow.com. All right, let's get back to me and Shauna. How do you see this working for students when they graduate from Blue Sky and then apply to university? Because I mean, typically, right, we expect universities to look at diploma results and this sort of thing. Like, how does that factor in?
Yeah, so that's a great question. As an independent school, you have the choice of whether to follow the existing provincial curriculum or not. The majority of independent schools that I have researched and learned about in this general region do use the Ontario curriculum simply because you have to be you have to be a bit crazy to decide that you're going to write a new curriculum with your learners and with your staff, which is what we are doing. So a few years ago, I was at ISTE, the big conference, the big tech education conference that's held in the US. And there were a couple of speakers there who Gary Steger actually mentioned, and it was a revelatory moment for me, but he was talking about curriculum. And he said, any curriculum is the tiniest piece of 1% of all of the human knowledge and skills that have ever existed that is selected by a small group of people, and often a group of very privileged people. Right. And it just hadn't occurred to me that the curriculum wasn't sort of this, magical document that included everything that it should. It just had not occurred to me prior to that. Right. And so as we are building a curriculum, we are really doing a lot of wondering around this of what is the knowledge, what are the skills that we all need to be contributing members of society and be successful and happy in our lives. And it's not easy to answer that. And so for our learners, they each have a completely personalized individual curriculum. So we go through a process that we've created where the learners, along with their parents and their pedagogical coach, create their own set of goals for about a period. And that's what the learners are assessed upon, both by themselves and their peers, as well as by our coaching staff. Right. And it's a very organic process that this all happens in. But when we start to think about scaling this and building this as a prototype that others can use, we don't have the exact formula mapped out yet. But some of the things that we believe around curriculum are things like we really like working with what we call like a T-shaped curriculum. So there's this broad exposure, which is the horizontal line at the top of an uppercase T, and then deep dig, which is the vertical line that follows. So the learners are all exposed to a wide variety of people and experiences and learning, but then they're able to dig more deeply into the things that they're passionate about and interested in and need to develop. And then our coaches continue to consider that part of the top of the T, and they build in opportunities for learners to develop skills that they need. And so in working with a couple of partners, what we are doing with our curriculum is currently, our current iteration of it, we call a STEAMed Plus curriculum. So STEM and STEAM will be familiar to, most folks in education, but STEAM stands for science, technology, engineering, arts, including language, mathematics, and then entrepreneurship and design. And then the plus also includes all of the other pieces: mental health and wellness, outdoor education, civic engagement, some of the pieces that are now becoming very clear to us that are bigger than those actual STEAM pieces. The plus is growing huger and huger. So we're looking, do we need a new acronym? Do we need to incorporate those more traditional school subjects into the project-based learning? So we are in a process of figuring all of this out. But your question was sort of around as learners leave us. And so we're working with local colleges and universities to figure out what that pathway can look like for our learners. And we have some really, really exciting things in the works where our learners will be able to leave Blue Sky School without the traditional curriculum, but have attended college and university courses for credit, where they will then be able to make a really, really educated choice about what sort of post-secondary opportunities they would like to explore, including college, university, or the work world, or additional apprenticeship or training. And they'll have done that through experience, and they'll have actually used their grade 4 to 12 time to explore and study things that they may end up also continuing to study in post-secondary learning. So
Wow.
we are in the early stages of building and launching, and we're not in the position of announcing specific details about it yet. But we do have this first cohort of learners who will be working their way through it with us, which is incredibly exciting.
Yeah. Well, and to put a finer point on this, then it sounds to me like you're allowing students to, I mean, curriculum or traditional school seems to be very, very much geared towards making all students sort of these, just a generalist, right? You've got your math and your social and your arts and all these bits and pieces. You have to have all of that in your head to a certain level of proficiency. But what you sound like you're saying is, let's give them this base, I guess for you a top, and then you're allowing your students to specialize a lot more deeply than the traditional system allows for.
Exactly. And then once, we have a student who would like to open a kennel. Like, she thought, 30 years from now I'll open a kennel, but she spent a good chunk of her year last year visiting vets and kennels and working with folks there, and doing all of her sort of traditional type of learning through that work. So she was reading and writing in her research for that, and on a digital portfolio, and communicating orally, with the folks she was partnering with, but also coming back and communicating with us at school. She was doing her numeracy through planning budgets and planning her field trips. And now her idea has developed into, she's learned how expensive veterinary care can be for animals. And that's the reason that a lot of animals can be abandoned or don't find homes. And so now she's trying to explore if there's some way to, create crowdfunding around providing care for animals, or
Right.
some way to create a little bit more equity around that. And so that's something that, she's been just so thrilled to be able to get so much of her traditional learning through the thing that she's so interested in. And, she'll often say she didn't think she was going to be able to do this until she was an adult. And she will be able to learn now, actually, is this a field she would like to stick with and explore in future years and throughout her life? Or is there something else that's going to grab her interest and put her in a new direction? And so we want to create those opportunities at a much younger age, so that learners can really see what it is that makes them tick and makes them excited.
Right. So, I mean, it sounds to me like you're dealing with a pretty select group of kids. I mean, the kids you're talking to me about seem like they're very focused, very motivated, very self-reliant. And I'll come out and say that I don't think the traditional education system equips students to act in that way. In fact, I mean, based on my own personal experience, but having seen several thousand kids come through my door, increasingly I find that my students are less motivated, less self-reliant, more and more wanting to just be told what to do and how to do it and how to fix problems. And, so all this to say that, do you think that Blue Sky School can work for every student? Because, I mean, I think through my student body right now, and I can think of probably one, maybe two students that I could literally, pick up and plunk into your school and they'd be fine.
Yeah. So it's another great question. Karen and I, both coming from public school backgrounds, believe extremely strongly in public schools. Like we see the absolute importance in having access to education, fantastic education, in a child's neighborhood. And we are only an independent school because of necessity. We would love to be a school within a school. We would love to be a public school. And so being an independent school comes with a whole host of interesting challenges, including, the perception of being an elite institution and having to be tuition based, being, exclusive. So we've worked extremely hard to build community, business, and private partners who provide financial assistance and scholarships to learn. And so the socioeconomic diversity is crucial to us, as is the cognitive and neurologic diversity. So from the beginning, we were trying to define who our sort of target audiences and target market, and that what you've described is sort of one conception and one perception that people have. But what we actually want to do is we want to help learners become more self-reliant and more self-directed. And so there's this huge unlearning process that the majority of our learners go through because they are accustomed to being told what to do, and they feel like they like being told what to do, and they feel like, they want a worksheet to fill out and have the right answers. So I don't know that we've had a single learner come to us like completely ready for self-direction. So there's a huge release of responsibility that they go through. And, in our second year, it's been super exciting because we've had these returning learners who are able to do some of the mentoring of the new learners in this way. But from the beginning, when we've talked about who we want to have at our school, as a prototype, we need to have a huge variety of learners because we want this to be a system that can be replicated and can help to inspire other classrooms and schools and systems.
Right.
So what we've done is we've created this little chart, and we have a horizontal line and a vertical line in this chart. And so the horizontal line is a continuum of one's perception of themselves as a learner. And so on one side, we have the perception where you are motivated and you're a capable learner. So these are learners who, know that they can do things. They accept challenges. They're willing and motivated. They really embrace their natural curiosity. I mean, we can look at pretty much any 3-year-old and they would be on one end of the spectrum, right? They would be motivated learners. It's the most natural thing in the world.
Yes.
Unfortunately, what happens through experience is a lot of us get that trained out of us. So everyone can basically sort of see themselves on that continuum. Like you can see yourself where you are today and you can see yourself through your schooling. So we want learners on all parts of that continuum. But then the other continuum that intersects with that is your fit within your current schooling system. And so at the top of that, we have people who are we call it quote unquote successful in the system. So these are folks who are, being accelerated with same age-based peers, who are maybe getting good grades, who are not seen as troublemakers, who are getting through the system. And that could include, straight A students, valedictorian, it could include all of that. And then at the other end of the spectrum, predictably, we have the underserved learners. And that's for a number of different reasons, social, emotionally, academically, neurologically, physically, behaviorally, all of those reasons that folks are underserved. And again, not for want of trying by the amazing educators that are working in every single education system. It just, the assumption that it should be like an adult with 30 children makes it absolutely impossible to serve, the needs of even a very homogenous group of learners.
Yeah.
What we say is we need learners from all of those 4 quadrants that occur from those 2 continua. And so, but we didn't know how to classify that. We have no standardized test, right? It's a lot of self-reporting. And so we just sort of, met families, talked about what we were offering, talked about what they were looking for, and students enrolled last year in this totally ephemeral program that we had no physical place to bring them to. It was just like, here's this word cloud of ideas, come and join us. And remarkably, I shared with them that sort of concept and that theory in December of our first year of operation, and had the learners each self-identify before they came to Blue Sky School. And in the first 8 learners I talked to, who were the first 8 to arrive that day, there were 2 in each of the quadrants. Like it was just
oh wow, that's nice,
a remarkable thing. And then throughout the day, we had 12 learners at that point. All of them arrived, and it was nearly a quarter in each. But then we had them measure where they were at that moment. And without exception, every single learner put themselves somewhere in the quadrant of both motivated / capable / smart,
Mhm.
served by the system they were in.
Huh.
It was an incredible piece of self-reporting, right? It was so
Yeah.
powerful to see that these learners who, I was sitting at their kitchen tables and some of them had told me they were the stupidest person in their school or their class. And now suddenly saying, no, I'm smart and I'm capable. And my school sees me as that as well and is doing what I need from me.
That's awesome.
So all that to say, we need a variety of learners. So, having all learners or the majority of learners from any one of those 4 quadrants actually sinks us. Shortly after the learners self-assessed in all 4 of those quadrants, we had some visitors come to the school on a tour, as we often do, and several of them were not from education, and so one of them came up to me after, and she's like, "I just don't get it." And I was like, "Okay." Like, I have learned very much to try to wait till the end of a question, which I'm not demonstrating in this podcast, but
that's fine.
What somebody's asking. So I said, yeah, tell me what you're thinking. And she goes, well, like, it's great, but like, this is a school for exceptional learners. And at that point, if you had looked on paper at our learners, we had many, many, many with diagnoses. So from the education world, when you hear exceptional learners, you think of learners, who you have to write an IEP for, right? Like learners who are maybe struggling for one reason or another. Anyway, I said to her, "Oh, what do you mean by that?" Knowing she wasn't from education. She said, "Well, these are all gifted kids, right?" Mm-hmm. And at the time, we didn't have a single learner in our school who had been identified as gifted. But each of them were so passionate about the work they're doing that they were engaged in things that, you wouldn't typically see even these children engaged with. They were talking really authoritatively about numeracy and science and the projects that they were doing and confidently speaking to these adults about the challenges that they were facing in their learning. So that just is one of the most exciting things that's happened to us, because in the right environment, every child is able to demonstrate their genius and their incredible skills and talents and capabilities.
Got it. That's awesome. That is really fantastic. Shauna, I hate to do this. I mean, we could go for a part 3, I feel like, but I think we've come to the end of the time that we have for today.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I blabbed a lot. There's
no
answers.
That's your job. You're supposed to blab a lot. So you're doing great. This is perfect. Oh, wow. No, I got a few more questions, but I think we're at the point now I'm just going to have to buy a plane ticket and come see you.
Well, I need to figure out too, at this point, like, our learners are far better at telling the stories and showing what's going on than I am. Mm-hmm. One of our learners said at some point last year, I'd given someone a tour and she said, like, bring them back when we're here. The learners are the best part. And it's completely true. And so we need to figure out a way to capture that. We need to relaunch our podcast, number one, but a lot of them have started coming up with ideas for videos and stuff to show the work that we're doing. And a couple of them are partnering with this really interesting organization called Beluga, and they're going to be posting about their learning journeys. So I think that will help tell the story more as well once we have the learners really showing their way of navigating through this. Because, I can say all of this stuff and it's really meaningless unless it's truly happening and it's in action, and it's an exciting place to hang out because it truly is. We really do practice what we teach.
Awesome. Sorry, I'm just in listening mode. You just keep talking. But so if people do want to learn a little more, sort of again buying that plane ticket, how can they get in touch with you?
We are on all of the social medias with as Blue Sky School CA. Mm-hmm. So that is Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Mm-hmm. And you can find links to all of our coaches on there as well, including myself. And our website is blueskyschool.ca, and everything's linked on there, including all of that social media and podcasts and our student-run blog.
Awesome. Well, Shauna, thank you once again for coming out and chatting with me again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I hope I actually answered even one of your questions.
You did, and even some bonus questions. It's awesome. I've got more, but I think we're just gonna have to wrap it up today, unfortunately. So, yeah, we'll maybe see you at some point out in Ontario. I'd love to come and visit your school.
I hope so. You're welcome anytime.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, this week's episode of Ed is brought to you by Park Power, a provider of electricity and natural gas in Alberta that offers low rates, awesome service, and profit sharing with local charities. In Alberta, you get to choose who to buy your energy from, and if you choose Park Power, your money stays here. Plus, Park Power shares its profits with local not-for-profits that are working to make a difference for their communities. Shopping local is very important to Park Power's owner, Chris Kozowski, and we love local here at the Alberta Podcast Network, so it's a great fit. Learn more at parkpower.ca. And if you want to get in touch or you'd like to be a guest of the show, you can email me at theedpodcast@gmail.com or hit me up on Twitter at theedpodcast. If you want to listen to more of Ed, you can head over to the website, theedpodcast.podbean.com, or you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the podcatcher of your choice. Just search up Ed Conversations. Ed is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network powered by ATB. You can find this and all other member podcasts at albertapodcastnetwork.com. Ed can also be heard on Voice Ed Radio. It's 24-hour internet broadcasting devoted to the best ideas in education. Just head over to voiced.ca. So, on behalf of myself and Shauna, thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.